During World War II, Germany was quite indeed ruling the world with their powerful leader, Adolf Hitler. D-Day was an invasion of France made by the Allies in order to liberate France and Western Europe from Nazi Germany. D-Day was organized by President Franklin D. Roosevelt and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill. They spent months planning, working on, and critiquing D-Day. They then appointed General Dwight D. Eisenhower the commander of the invasion, who helped plan and supervise D-Day. The Allies saw the capture of the French capital as an opportunity to end the war in Europe as quickly as possible by compelling the surrender of Germany so they could focus on the other countries outside of Europe. The D-Day invasion took place on June 6, 1944. 156,000 American, British, and Canadian forces landed on 5 beaches along the Normandy coast of France, which was one of the largest amphibious military assaults in history. The invasion would last 2 months, 3 weeks, and 3 days until the Allies reached northern France, resulting in an Allied victory. D-Day denied Germany any further exploitation of France's economic and manpower resources. D-Day was a major event that occurred in World War II, as it would ultimately be one of the main reasons Nazi Germany surrendered on May 7, 1945. On September 2, 1945, World War II would conclude. Before we dive deeper into D-Day, I need to explain what happened before D-Day that made this operation necessary. Once Hitler rose, he had long planned an invasion of Poland. Adolf Hitler led the Nazi Party, which was the biggest political party in Germany at the time. On September 1, 1939, Hitler invaded Poland from the west. 2 days later, France and Britain declared war on Germany, beginning World War II. On September 17th, Poland fell quickly, and by early 1940, Germany and the Soviet Union had divided control over Poland. On April 9, 1940, Germany simultaneously invaded Norway and occupied Denmark. On May 10th, German forces swept through Belgium and the Netherlands. 3 days later, Hitler's troops crossed the French border with their tanks and planes. The British Expeditionary Force was evacuated by sea from Dunkirk in late May, while in the south, French forces mounted a doomed resistance. France was on the verge of collapse. After the fall of Dunkirk, Hitler stated, "Soldiers of the West Front, Dunkirk has fallen. With it has ended the greatest battle in world history. Soldiers, my confidence in you knows no bounds. You have not disappointed me." By early 1941, Hungary, Romania, and Bulgaria had joined the Axis powers, and German troops overran Yugoslavia and Greece that April. On June 22, 1941, Hitler invaded the Soviet Union. In order for Germany to be slowed, action needed to be taken. Germany was spreading fast throughout Europe, and action needed to be taken. On December 8, 1941, the day after Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor, the United States declared war. Within 3 days, Germany engaged the United States, honoring their agreement with Japan. From the beginning, President Franklin D. Roosevelt and British Prime Minister Winston Churchill knew that a massive invasion of mainland Europe was needed in order for Nazi Germany to surrender. Churchill and Roosevelt discussed some version of a second front in 1942. They proposed Operation Sledgehammer, a plan to seize ports along France's northwest coast and then execute a major invasion in the spring of 1943. But the U.S. couldn't muster up enough resources needed for an operation of such dramatic scale, which military experts estimated would take a minimum of 400,000 troops. Roosevelt and Churchill soon discussed a different approach. Instead of an invasion in Europe, they would invade northwest Africa. If successful, as it was known, it would relieve pressure on British forces. This was called Operation Torch. Operation Torch began on November 8, 1942. It was the first major operation U.S. troops took against the German army. This helped free up British forces so they could focus on Europe. In 1943, Generals Dwight D. Eisenhower and Bernard Montgomery wanted a massive landing in Normandy. This mission would be risky, and Winston Churchill was hesitant about it. But Roosevelt knew that if enough planning went into it, it would be a massive success. They spent months planning, working on, and critiquing it. until they eventually mapped it out. The operation planning was complete and was set for June 6, 1944. The operation was called Operation Overlord, otherwise known as D-Day. Eisenhower stated, "If any blame or fault attaches to the attempt, it is mine alone, in case the invasion was a failure." Before the invasion, Eisenhower also stated, "Our home fronts have given us an overwhelming superiority in weapons and mutations of war, and placed at our disposal great reserves of trained fighting men. The tide has turned. The free men of the world are marching together to victory. I have full confidence in your courage, devotion to duty, and skill in battle. We will accept nothing less than full victory." On June 6, 1944, the D-Day operation took place. By dawn on June 6, thousands of paratroopers and glider troops were already on the ground behind enemy lines and securing bridges and exit roads. The amphibious invasion began at 6:30 a.m. About 156,000 American, British, and Canadian forces landed on Five Beach along a 50-mile stretch of the heavily fortified coast of France's Normandy region. The beaches were codenamed Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno, and Sword, and each of them were assigned either to the US, UK, or Canada. D-Day was one of, if not the biggest amphibious assaults in history. The first part of the assault was to gain a nice foothold on the coast of Normandy and then push on further from there. The Allies' goal was to reach the Seine River and then later Paris. The operation stretched out for a long 2 months, 3 weeks, and 3 days. According to some estimates, more than 4,000 Allied troops lost their lives in the D-Day invasion, with thousands more wounded or missing. The invasion of Normandy ended up being a huge success, but the Allies needed to move further inland in order to get closer to Paris. German General Dietrich von Choltitz was the commander of the Nazi-occupied Paris, and had to deal with the resistance in Paris against the other countries. Hitler had ordered Paris to defend the last man and demanded that the city not to fall into Allied hands except as a field of ruins. The Allies ran into heavy German artillery, taking heavy casualties as they moved further inland. But on August 24th, they managed to cross the Seine River and reach the Paris suburbs. The German resistance was very poor in Paris, considering that they were supposed to stop the Allies from reaching Paris. Most of the 20,000 troops surrendered or fled, and the ones who continued fighting quickly got overcome by the force of the Allied troops. The morning of August 25th, the Allies swept the west and east, and Paris was liberated. General Dietrich von Choltitz was arrested and later signed a document formally surrendering Paris to President de Gaulle's provisional government. A couple of days later, on May 7, 1945, Nazi Germany surrendered, ultimately concluding World War II. When World War II ended in 1945, it came with many benefits. The war provided countries with knowledge on how to advance technology. For example, America was a nation that in 1938 was making almost no weapons, but by 1943 were making more than twice as many as all of its enemies combined, which helped them make many technological advances such as radar, computers, penicillin, the Jeep, the atomic bomb, and more. Never before had war demanded such technological experimentation and business organization, historian Alan Nevin stated. World War II helped advance technology more than any other war. Another thing that arose after the war was NATO. The Allied powers agreed to establish the United Nations, also known as the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, which was the combined effort of 50 nations all around the world. This would help to make sure that something to the extent of World War II would never happen again. It would assure that the countries that do have war don't spread around the world. D-Day ultimately changed the world. D-Day changed the course of the war in the Allies' favor and was one of the main reasons Nazi Germany surrendered. If D-Day never happened, the Allies would have needed to do something very drastic in order to liberate Western Europe. Because of D-Day, millions of lives were saved for the price of a couple thousand. D-Day helped America make new innovations after the war, and in a way, D-Day allowed the world to come to peace.